Okay, it is exactly 6:02, and I would call the meeting to order. And I want to thank everybody for giving me their current email addresses and also phone numbers so that we can stay in touch. Now, we have previously circulated to everybody the draft minutes of our first meeting of October 4th. Are there any comments or corrections to those meetings? There was one little typo. Can we have a motion to approve?
Motion to approve.
Second.
Who made the motion? Was that you, Patrick?
That was.
Okay.
Mark, second.
First, Mark. Second, and we'll take a roll call vote. Mark,
Yes.
Patrick,
Aye.
Nancy,
Aye.
Tom.
Well, I'm sorry, I can't vote because I wasn't there. I'm sorry.
Okay, so Tom
Yes, aye.
and myself, yes. So we would have four yes, and Sosha abstains.
Look at that. We already have consensus. What a great group.
Okay. Okay, the next point I'd like to make, I'd like to recap everybody with the results of the approval of the articles of June 12. That was the annual meeting. Article 20 read, I move, and that was the moderator, that the town, as recommended by the Community Preservation Committee and pursuant to the Community Preservation Act, appropriate from Community Preservation undesignated fund balance the sum of $100,000 for community housing purposes to be used by the town of Stockbridge for the funding of a housing trust. Provided, however, that such appropriation shall be contingent upon the development and approval by town meeting of the Stockbridge Housing Trust. Okay, and basically that article was approved at the meeting as a result of as we had said, the community preservation submission of the Community Preservation Committee submission of a project that basically summarizes to enable home ownership amongst first-time homeowners. The town would like to create an independent housing trust fund to support down payment assistance and the purchase of either homes or parcels for home ownership. And that was the basis for the approval of that article. I just wanted to refresh everybody so that we're all on the same page. Any questions relative to that?
So just to confirm that we have $100,000 available to go
That's
towards this
correct.
purpose.
And the 100,000 mark, just to confirm, it would include expending money for legal fees to develop the trust too. Okay, in addition to ultimately subject to what's developed, whatever remains being left for distribution for the purpose noted. And also the development of the trust would have to be approved by the town at a town meeting.
What's involved in developing the trust? Is there certain
We're going to come to
rules?
that. We'll come to that. Give us a minute, okay? And Michael most aptly circulated to everybody a manual which you did receive, the Municipal Affordable Housing Trust Operations Manual, which goes through all of the steps required to set up a trust. Okay, and we'll talk about that in just a few minutes. We also circulated copies, amongst other things, of a similar program for Lenox, Great Barrington. Williamstown has a similar program, as does Littleton, Massachusetts. Okay, and everybody did get a copy of that, of those documents. Any questions up to this point before we start to talk about the startup? None? Okay, Michael, any comments you might have?
Nope, not at this point.
Okay. One of the things that we have to do in getting started, and I'm just going to refresh everybody and respond to Mark Mills's comment, is we do have to submit a housing trust bylaw. We have to establish a board of trustees. We have to set up a trust fund account. All of this would be pro forma until it's ultimately approved at a town by the select board and recommended at a town meeting. Also, legal considerations, we would have to get town council to assist us in the development of this trust, and sources of revenue. Historically, we have gotten the first 100,000 from community preservation, but there may be other sources of revenue, i.e. Town funding, etc. So those are some of the things initially. Also, we have to stipulate in the trust what the trust is going to be used for. I outlined the initial purpose, and that would, beyond the initial purpose, that would be expanded over time as we develop it. The board and powers of the trust. One thing we would have to select in the establishment of a board are people, fiduciaries, in essence, bank people, people that have familiarity with real estate, people that are really basically totally independent from the process, so that they can properly advise the town. But I think those are some of the steps that we have to go through as we establish the trust. And my reaction would be that we develop a pro forma, and then we bring it back to the committee. That pro forma would require input from legal counsel. Would that be an appropriate step, Michael Canales?
When you say pro forma,
A draft trust
Yeah.
document.
right, the declaration of our trust, which there's
Declaration.
examples from the other communities that we have. We can decide if we want to work off of one, pretty much look at it and see if there's anything particular to Stockbridge that we'd like to put in or take out, and then get it over to legal and have them approve it. And then we're on our way.
Have who approve it? The committee.
Go to this, you have this committee approve it and then send it to the selectmen. Yeah.
And send it to the selectmen and ultimately for approval at town meeting. Right?
Yep.
Okay. Any questions on that up to this point?
So Jay, we would look at other bylaws that have been set up
Yes.
prior to this, and it could be a format for us to work from.
Yes, we have them. I circulated the one from Lenox. We do have them. And I don't want to make work for Michael Canales, but I'm happy to work with Michael to put the draft together and then send it off to legal counsel, prior to which we'll get an estimate for legal fees and then circulate it to the committee once we get something that's formalized. Does that make sense to everybody?
Do we have to visit the banks that we want to work in conjunction with?
It's a little premature to do that.
Okay,
Yeah.
First
And,
step
we
is the
have to-
declaration
we
trust.
have to make sure that there's no conflict of interest there relative to the banks. Patrick?
Oh.
That we see a draft ourselves before we incur legal expenses. I really think that we need to start by talking about what we see the components of this program, its funding sources, really kind of hash out the vision, and then, sort of, then start drafting. I think, I don't want to start drafting first thing. I think that ends up costing the town a lot of money in consultants, as we've seen.
Well, I mean, the basic funding source that we have so far is 100,000 from community preservation. And ultimately that would, that should be able to get us through the initial draft with monies left over ultimately.
Well, but Jay, you mentioned Lennox. In Lennox's affordable housing trust, they get funding from developments over a certain size, with the idea being that, in these markets, real estate is so valuable and so profitable to develop that if you're doing a big development, that, they have a formula in the Lennox bylaw, which talks about, I think it's 15 units, they fund the equivalent of 1 unit for the affordable housing trust. So I'm not saying we should do that in Stockbridge, but that's an example of a conversation I think the group should have, where we really kind of hash out what our vision is and the sorts of things that we want to include. I don't want the lawyers driving the process. I'd much rather have us drive it.
Well, step one is the declaration of the trust. Then you're going to promulgate bylaws beyond that address what you're talking about.
Well, we could do it in conjunction, Michael. I mean, we could.
We could. I think we get the declaration moving.
Just saying, we do one town meeting a year. I mean, okay.
Mike, is that the same thing as a vision statement? Do we need a vision statement of our committee?
Well, that'd all be in the declaration of the trust,
Okay,
what the purpose would be. And
Right.
I think Michael Canales, I think I heard him say very clearly that the draft would be developed based on what we have from other communities and see what makes sense for presentation to this committee.
right.
I mean,
Here's
There you go.
the,
here it is.
Okay.
This was
Declaration.
circulated to everybody.
Yeah,
I understand Patrick's concerns about running up legal fees prematurely, and it sounds like that if Jay and Michael work off of a similar document from another town, get it into some kind of rough form, and then we circulate it amongst ourselves and discuss amongst ourselves,
Right.
that we might get a lot of ideas down to really indicate where we want to go with this prior to starting the clock on an attorney's fee. So I think we could make a lot of headway before we bring in the lawyers, but ultimately, obviously, they have to take a look at it. But I think we can have a big discussion about it, Patrick, and get our ideas in there before going to the lawyers, if I'm reading this right.
Michael, I'm comfortable with Mark's comments. Do you have a comfort level with that?
yes.
Yeah. So I think you're right on, Mark.
We'll carry the ball as far down the field as we can before we
Yeah.
bring in the legal beagles.
Yeah, but I mean, the important thing is that we don't want to have a final document to present to the select board and ultimately the town until it's signed off, one, by this committee, and ultimately we run it by legal at some point,
Oh, yeah.
so we make sure we're not stepping somewhere where we shouldn't be. Okay. So basically, I think the next steps, I think what we have said here is that we are going to prepare a draft, a declaration draft document, okay? And we will also prepare some draft bylaws, and those would be reviewed by the committee. That would be, we'll bring that back to the committee, and that would be done by myself and Michael. And also, as Mark had said and I would agree with that, we would have this, we would at least flush it out with the committee before we send it to legal and look for subsequent approvals. So
Mhm.
that's where I see we're starting off. Anybody have any comments up to this point? Michael, anything else we should be talking about at this juncture? Michael
Uh,
Canales?
On the focus of the initiative is on your agenda.
Yeah,
Which one are we on right now?
well, I think I had said that based on what the initial approval was at town meeting, we were talking about first-time home buyers. Okay,
There's the other component, if you read it again, it does.
I didn't hear what you said, Michael.
There's two components in the article.
Okay, hang on.
Yep.
I have it right in front of me. It says here, to appropriate 100,000 for community housing purposes to be used by the town of Stockbridge for funding a housing trust, provided, however, that such appropriation should be contingent upon development and approval by town meeting of a Stockbridge of a housing trust.
Right, if you
That's
go to
what-
the other article that established the trust. And sorry, I don't have it in front of me, but
That is Article 20.
that's the funding source.
Okay.
You read it before.
Do you remember the article number?
I don't. I remember you stating it right in the beginning because it is the
No. Okay, what I stated in the beginning, that community preservation submission to the board and ultimately to the town.
Right.
That's
Oh, all right. Can you read that one again?
okay. That just for everybody's, for clarification, so I'm not trying to slip anything in. On January 21st, the Stockbridge Community Preservation Committee project submission sheet, request for proposal was submitted to that committee for a housing trust. And the description of the project would be to enable home ownership amongst first-time home owners. The town would like to create an independent housing trust to support down payment assistance and the purchase of either homes or parcels for home ownership.
Right. So the other piece is the ownership and acquisition of parcels,
Yes,
which would go back to, I'm going to share the screen again from the handbook that we had.
yes, forgive me for not clarifying that.
These are the items that typically we can do, and based on what we sent to community preservation is provide these different options. And it can be a public-private partnership to provide construction of affordable housing, rehabilitating, to convert to affordable housing, increase affordable. So you can see the list right here.
Yep.
What a trust can do.
Yep.
And I think that's where our next discussion, and it might not be this necessarily getting too in depth, but these are tonight, but these are the ones we need to start thinking of. We'll get the declaration done for the next meeting to review. And we should be looking at which one of these are we targeting with that.
I would add to your comment, Michael, we should be targeting and not, we can't do everything at once on a startup.
Right. I agree with that.
Because basically, if you look at these criteria, the establishment of the Board of Trustees is going to be predicated on which functions the trust is going to do. And over time, you may have to add or delete people as from trustees, trustees of the trust, if you will.
Right.
Right?
Yep.
Yeah.
I do think that one of the things that we want to think about is sort of the scope of what the responsibilities of this group will be. for example, I helped June advocate for that paving project at Pine Woods, and that was actually at the urging of Jim Balfans. I want to give him credit for that. And when I was talking to June last January, she was pointing out that when they built Pine Woods, federal maintenance money was available for a minimum of 30 units. As long as you had 30 units, you could get federal funds to maintain the property. And so they built 32, and now the feds increased it to 48 units, which is why Pine Woods is kind of deteriorating, because we don't have the ability to apply for maintenance and repair funds. So, sort of thinking about what some of these issues are and kind of figuring out how we're going to, in the long term, maintain all of our affordable housing, whether we build 16 more units or whether we find other ways to fund it. Andrea, maybe you have some insight into this, but I think that, kind of the universe of affordable housing, personally, I think maybe should be kind of how we look at the mission.
I think one of the things in the development of the trustees and the development, if you will, of the declaration of trust would be how, in addition to establishing whatever focus we are going to take, how these things are going to be monitored over time. Okay. I think that makes sense.
Yeah.
Ongoing supervision, ongoing project monitoring and assessment. Nancy?
Do you think it would be beneficial to have someone from Lenox and or Great Barrington who, when they developed their affordable housing projects, to come to us and tell us how they did it, or their pitfalls, or, how they expedited what they would like, or what they had to do?
We Michael and I can talk about that, and we can also have an off-the-cuff conversation with Chris Ketchen, the town administrator, about that subject. Okay. Well, we know Chris very well.
Yeah.
And I'm sure we could get somebody here probably for our
Yes.
next meeting.
Yeah.
Yeah.
As far as I'm concerned, I think this is where we are at this point, and I think Michael and I have to get together for the next steps, and then come back with a draft document to the committee, if everybody is comfortable with that.
Which one are we going to work off of as a draft? Does the committee have a preference, or? Because I think that I would recommend that we work off the Lenox one.
Yeah,
Yeah,
it seems
I
more
would agree.
streamlined. Yeah.
Yep.
Yeah,
would
I mean,
agree with that.
Yeah, okay.
I'm just making a note for myself. Lennox document. Okay, that's fine.
And I'll reach out tomorrow to him to request a Word copy of it.
Yeah, yeah. I have a Xerox copy, but we can get a Word copy and we can circulate it to everybody.
I think it's right on their website.
I'm sorry?
I think it's right on the Lenox website.
It's a PDF on their website, and I'm not sure if it's fully readable or not. But I could probably just send over a request to them for their actual Word
Sure.
document. And
Sure.
just speed things up a little bit.
That'd be great.
That's what I have at this point. Is there any other business to come before our committee?
Well, are we not going to talk, Jay, even a little bit about sort of the agenda item? Where is that? I look at it, I think we should, points 5 and 6, I think, are going to be kind of important. Nuances of how we approach the paperwork.
I think, Patrick, we need to look at that and see what these other communities do, and at least come back to the committee with a draft approach for comment, so that we just don't, we have something to base a substantive conversation on. This has got to be researched out.
Yes.
I don't have all the answers to this at this point, okay? So I think, we will put something down and then we'll present it to the committee. I have no problem with that. Let's see what Lennox and some of the other communities do.
Okay, I just want to kind of emphasize that, we're going to have a multifaceted approach because, we can only give down payment assistance for the purchase of affordable homes. And there's a definition of what makes the home affordable. It has to do with the area median income and some very specific guidelines the state provides us. So we're going to have an umbrella that thinks about how we build affordable housing, how we then support the individuals who want to have affordable housing, and how we pay for it all. And I think that conversation, when we're ready to have it, doesn't have to be tonight, is going to really we don't have to start with everything, but we're gonna have to make sure we're getting good advice on some of the basic parameters, because we obviously can't subsidize market rate units. It's against the law. We can only subsidize affordable housing. So I think it's just we got several different things we could do. Some are more expensive than others. I think at some point soon we should talk about that.
Let us come back to the committee. Anything else, folks?
I just have sort of some general observations as I'm reading into this and sort of getting into the subject matter, looking at the Lennox and Great Barrington criteria and whatnot. It sounds to me, first of all, like $100,000 doesn't go very far in doing anything relating to housing these days. The prices for the homes that were the maximum in the Lennox and GB write-ups seem to be extremely low for Stockbridge. I don't know what kind of housing we have for under $300,000. I just wonder if we're in a marketplace that's just out of scale with what we're talking about here for resources and the kind of criteria that are being used to do this.
I think we have to look at the information we have and see how we can move the scale upward and how far upward it's typical to move it. I mean, there are state guidelines here relative to this, and I don't think we can answer that right now.
Oh. Yeah, I mean, that's why we have to develop partnerships. The construction cost in the Berkshires, even for modest homes, is running $450 a foot. But if you bring in Habitat for Humanity, you can do it for $200 or $300 a foot because they use volunteer labor. So we got to find the land. We got to find the partners. The great thing about Habitat is we don't have to pay for any of the construction costs. They finance it through their banks. So we can make that $100,000 go further if we develop good partnerships and we have a good plan to kind of get stuff done. Because then, for example, if we build 10 units with Habitat, we can then subsidize those 10 units with a down payment of $10,000 each. And that's where that money could really be helpful. So, we're gonna have to figure it out.
The other point, Mark Mills, in answer to your response, is the 100,000 is for year one, and ultimately additional monies were proposed for subsequent years to community preservation. So this is not a one-shot deal that's going to go away. Okay, there's longer-term funding involved here.
Good.
I think Tom had something.
Michael?
Did Tom have something?
Yeah.
No, I'm good. Thanks, though. Okay.
Michael Canellis?
So I was going to say that in the guide, one of the things that, and I think Mark, you've hit on it, and Nancy also, with our vision. One of the thing is coming up with what the vision is and what we're trying to accomplish. And Patrick, you're saying that too. And then what role will this play? Because, right, if you look at the data and the cost of homes that fit within affordable in Berkshire County and the average medium income in your area, right, whether or not a first-time home buyers assistance program will actually help somebody, since they're going to have to keep the house affordable, that they can't basically flip them. It might not be that attractive in Stockbridge. So this is where we got to think about what the vision really is of this and what components within it will actually work, because, right, we might identify that there's almost no homes right now available.
Well, they're all market. We have no affordable housing that people can purchase. All of our affordable housing is rental. So this is a start from scratch effort. It's similar to what Great Barrington's doing with those 49 units that they're building. Now that's a scale obviously way beyond what we're going to do, but there's generous folks who have land. We've already found that out. Those conversations are ongoing. A Habitat is eager to help us if we want their help. And then, then we've got resources. We can not only, raise cash, through efforts like this, we can also do in-kind service donations, like, the hookups of water and sewer. There's a lot of ways we can contribute to kind of make this work, but it's not going to be easy.
I think
I wonder,
we need to do some work and come back to the committee. Okay.
Yes.
I mean, I'd wonder, I know we'd need state approval for something like this, but I wonder if some small percentage of a real estate transaction stock tax rather could be a source of funding. So that if there's a $500,000 house that's sold, that a couple of $1,000s or some percentage kicks in towards this fund. And it's a way to, one of the things I'm thinking about housing for our town is that, we have our own little local housing market with people with Berkshire incomes and retirees and whatever. And then we have this group of people from New York predominantly, where people make amazing amounts of money and they come in and they totally distort our local housing market and make a lot of the housing out of reach for anybody locally. And if you're going to construct some housing in Stockbridge at this point, it's going to be $1 million house owned by somebody with a New York zip code. And we're not going to build anything for any local people or Berkshire people the way we are going now. And I think for people that are moving in, and there's nothing wrong with these folks who want to come in and buy a nice house or build a nice house. It's great, bring them in, get them into the town, that's fine. But because they are distorting our market, there should be some offsetting action, some mitigation for what they are doing as they come here and drive up the prices for everybody else. And this is sort of akin to a developer in Boston wanting to put a big complex in, and then they insist that they provide a park or a garage or something else that's sort of like, all right, you got to do this for us if you're going to do what you want to do. And I look at this distortion of our market that's being caused, again, by people with the best of intent, but it's still happening, as a source of where we should go and get some money to help offset and reduce the impact of the distortion that's occurring. And so I'm just throwing this out as a source of revenue, where if people come in and build or buy a big house, they're going to have to take a little slice and kick it in for people then who can get an opportunity to get some housing in our town, so we don't just become an enclave for rich New Yorkers.
I think that ultimately is going to be a legal issue as to what we can legally do and what we can't legally do.
Yeah.
And
I will check that. And the guidebook did give us some examples. And Mark, you hit the perfect one, which is a development where they insist on either cash payment for affordable housing, parks, and other streets, other items, but that's not for a single family home.
Yeah. That's not legal in Massachusetts.
Yeah, I don't believe it is, but I will ask the question and get that answer for our next meeting.
Well, if it goes into this trust, the trust seems to have a range of options of things it can do. And you put up that list, Michael, in the beginning, aside from just subsidizing or assisting with down payments, it looked like there was a lot of other options there. I don't know, I just throw this out knowing nothing legally about it. I'm just putting together, connecting dots to what looks like a reasonable approach to this. Whether or not it's legal or possible, I don't know.
Well, give us a chance to come back to you.
Of course.
Okay, anything else? Yes.
I just make a brief comment about mixed-use developments. I missed part of this conversation, so I don't know if everybody's aware of those where a developer has, they build something and they have to earmark a certain amount of units for affordable housing.
Sorry, inclusionary zoning, I believe it's referred to.
Yeah.
Yeah, and yeah, we were talking about that. The problem that we have is that the discussion's also around the fact that we really don't have developers. We have single family home purchases that are really driving everything right now. So I will get an answer as to whether or not anything can go on a single family home, because I am not aware of any, but
No, some states have that kind of transfer tax upon sale that local municipalities can do. I'm almost certain that that is not legal in Massachusetts.
yeah, the only one I'm aware of is a tax title sale, but we don't typically have those. So.
Anything else, folks?
I think I'm good.
I appreciate your time. I think this is a very interesting endeavor, and I think very definitely it will yield a productive result. So thank you, everybody, and we will be back in touch. And as always, feel free to contact me anytime about anything on this project.
Great, thanks.
Thanks,
Jay.
Jay.
Thanks,
Meeting
Jay.
adjourned. Thank you,
Nice seeing
everybody.
everybody.
Good
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 night.
everyone.
Bye.
Good night now.
Bye.
Right.
Thanks.